What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. I am Jack Allen. First, go follow me on all the socials at Kojak Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and now I even set up my Venmo as at Kojak Podcast to make it simple. So the only one that's different now is the Patreon Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. And thank you to May, our new Patreon supporter. I'm going to update that as well one of these days too. So it's going to be uniformed all the way around like it used to be before Twitter so rudely gave me the boot. But so yeah, today's show is Operation Operation Phoenix Part 3. And so the more I'm reading this book, like I learned, what's up, Dave? What's going on, dude? Thanks for coming in. You're the only one so far. But so this book, the Phoenix program, Operation Phoenix, I really now I'm really enjoying it. I kind of got like stuck on it for a while because Phoenix program had so many different things going on. In this book, it is way more like factual than crazy conspiracy, which is the zone that I enjoy to be in anyway. But I mean, dude, it was just chaos in Vietnam. So if you missed the first two episodes, my like really super quick overview was Vietnam has been colonized by the French for 300 years. Again, just these poor people that just like want to be left alone. The French are there just dominating them. And then World War II happens. The French keep losing power. America comes in. We say, we're the best. We're not going to force you guys we're not going to colonize you. We're going to let you have your own wonderful democracy. Let me share this gift with you. And so we did that. And then the North, there's just fights between the North and the South, but it's just utter chaos, dude. That's this book talks about is just so it's like almost so frustrating that, and that's what it adds even more credence to like the CIA and the military industrial complex and just how truly evil these two organizations are, these two like beliefs or whatever you want to call it, because there was no point of this war. It was an unwinnable battle. And we're going to get into like so much interesting stuff because this book isn't like written by a conspiracy guy. So he doesn't bring up things that I noticed, but I'm stuck now at the point were these people fighting the CIA people doing all these horrible things that just, totally shattering their once normal personality or their once normal persona, this violence that they saw. Was it they really thought they were fighting communism? And I think some like the regular Joe Schmoes, yeah, I think they thought that. They thought that the communism is so evil that you need to do whatever is necessary to stop that evil. And then the other flip of the coin, I think that there's these people at the top. They don't, like the Alan Dulleses, these people of the CIA, they know they're not really anti-communism. They're just making money and all this stuff. But that's the only thing I can't figure out is how many people were like, if it's only these people at the top, just how despicable they are as a human being to just allow million or thousands of young Americans and Vietnamese just be needlessly slaughtered for an unwinnable battle, dude. And that's what basically the past two episodes have just been leaned to that. Dave says it was winnable. They didn't want/need to win what they wanted to achieve. I agree, dude. Yeah, it absolutely was winnable, but they didn't want to fight the war that way. It just was a mess, dude. And we're going to get into some of the messes that were brought up. So last episode, like I said, we went over French Vietnam history. We went over how before Operation Phoenix started, there's a lot of these little like side projects that's the CIA is running and the army and the military, but it's a cluster F word. Like it is so messed up. There's so much bureaucracy. This is before computers, and they're running like psychological warfare campaigns on the people. And I talked about Edward Lansdale, who he would drain people of blood to make them think vampires killed him. He was a marketing guy. And Dave brought up war is money, poppy is money. And so that was another thing in Operation Gladio. I talked about how a lot of these wars in Korea and then Vietnam and in China, they all go back, Afghanistan, they all go back to the heroin trade. And so I know I'm getting way off Phoenix, but I think that's why we stopped the war in the Middle East, because with the introduction of fentanyl needs no poppy. No opium is needed to make fentanyl. So all these wars to fund Operation Gladio that after World War II, like in Vietnam and all Afghanistan, these huge poppy production places. Dave, I love your comments, but they stopped these wars because they didn't need them anymore. The CIA runs the drug trafficking worldwide. It's 100%. I don't think anybody else does it. And after they fentanyl came big and they realized, wow, we don't need to have farmers, these third world people farming the poppy seeds. All right, perfect. Then we don't need to be there. And that's why they left. And we talked all right. Let's just get to Operation Phoenix. And yeah, let me just find my spot here. But so we're in like 1966, late 60s. So we talked about last episode, the USS Maddox. We drop off these Navy SEALs on an island. They're supposed to take down a radar equipment. They get dropped off on the wrong end of the island. The Viet Cong fire at the USS Maddox. That's the Gulf of Tonkin. That's Jim Morrison's dad. And that's when LBJ signs the Gulf of Tonkin resolution or whatever it's called. And that was in mid 60s. And that's really when we upped the ante in Vietnam. Prior to that, we had people there, but it wasn't too intense. And this is when the real Vietnam War, like all the songs and everything really gets going. And so in 1966, Washington and Saigon, because obviously we're working with the Vietnamese, they're like trying to resolve this debate. Who should lead the pacification of South Vietnam? What's up, Josh? What's going on, dude? And you would think it would be the Vietnamese, right? Like they should, it's their country. They want this democracy, supposedly. Well, no, the U.S., LBJ, and America realized that if we left the war, South Vietnam's done for. They can't fight for themselves. The Viet Cong, they were trained in they all would get thrown in jail by the French years earlier. So they developed these guerrilla tactics that were the Americans were not used to. And they fought the French with them. So they're very good at what they do. And again, the South Vietnam, they didn't really want this war. They just literally wanted to farm and be left alone. You can think of the Vietnamese as like libertarians. I think the percentage was like 20% is the Viet Cong. And literally there was like 9% that were actively trying to fight. And that was a huge thing that the Americans also couldn't overcome in Vietnam, was that they were like, how do we get these guys to fight? Like, how do we inspire them? And the only thing that motivated them was really money and physical wealth, because they were starving half the time. So they would we're going to get into it, but they would sell information, not to help hurt the Viet Cong, but just to get whatever they could get. They would sell it to every CIA person in the province, and we'll get into all that. But so 1966, we're figuring out, what do we do here? What do we do here? Things are still going poorly, and there's a major reorganization campaign. Military operations are escalated, but you had all this bureaucracy. It was just pandemonium. Like the military, they're trying to set up battles. The police, they're trying to arrest and send VC to jail, Viet Congs. And then the intelligence, the CIA, they're trying to capture, interrogate, and turn these Viet Cong into their assets or agents. But it was agreed that if the military went to Vietnam for a conventional war, but it became clear by 1966, this war was not going to be like every other war. It was not going to be seizing territory, pressing on. It just wasn't like that, because these people, they just hid in these villages, and it was unrecognizable to the Americans, which I smile, because it's like, just so evil are people that propagandize the public and these young men to fight in this battle. And I think I mentioned this on a show, but I saw the statistic that we always think World War II, the most, that America's greatest generation, your grandparents, my grandparents, 18-year-old men fighting the Nazis, fighting in Japan, whatever. There was more people that enlisted, like the percentage wise, not like numbers. 2/3 out of every Americans that are like military age, they signed up to fight in Vietnam, as opposed to like 1/3 in World War II. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but it was significantly higher in Vietnam. Insane. What's up, Brian? Saturday, honey. No shows on the honeymoon, I don't think, unless I'm going to stream from the beach, which would be cool too, but I won't have my microphone. But yeah, so the conclusion was to create a combined campaign plan that emphasized and eliminated the Viet Cong and their infrastructure and destroy these guerrilla forces. So this guy in the CIA, he also writes this like pamphlet. They're big on writing pamphlets in the CIA, like and publishing them. I guess I don't know why. I don't think they get any. Maybe they want like the pride or to brag about it. What's up, Barbara? What's going on? And so it talks about how only 5% of the population was politically active. That was the statistics in Vietnam. 2.5 for the insurgents and 2.5 against them. So 5% of Vietnam was actively engaged in this war on one side or the other. That's it. 95% of the people did not want, they just wanted to literally have their oxen farm the rice and the rice paddies and have enough food to live. 5%. Isn't that disgusting? Josh is living jackpot. One day. We have some old ones. I have to delete them. Liv hates listening to them. But the rural population, they're not the driving force. They literally just want to be left alone. So the goal was destroy the infrastructure, you destroy the insurgency. And you can view the Viet Cong as like a mafia operating under this pretense of political ideology, but it's coercing people through the use of selective terror. So they would, I talked about how last episode, like a pregnant woman, they would disembowel her, kill the baby, leave it there to scare the people in the village that you better not go against the Viet Cong. So like true mafia tactics. And the CIA did the same thing. So there was no, I'm not claiming one is better or the other. CIA would do that same attack to try and pin it on the Viet Cong. And then they come back and say, oh, people, look what the Viet Cong do to you. You should stop. We would never do this, when they were literally the ones that did it. Just beyond disgusting. Again. So the Viet Cong, that we would either ambush them with police or special forces, search and destroy hamlets. They'd collect Viet Cong from their files, defectors, and try to catch them in these like sweep operations. And even though Colby told Congress that Phoenix was a police program, it was much more than a police program. And in that pamphlet attack, Brickham says Phoenix has direct military involvement, like doing 175 millimeter artillery fire at a Viet Cong conference of higher ups. So again, this is just total like gang warfare. Honestly, that's literally what it is. And the Viet Cong also remained stronger because they had a single continuous leader. Whereas the South, we just had all these different factions with the CIA, the Army, the Vietnamese. Everyone's trying to make a name for themselves. Everyone's trying to get rich. Everyone's vying for power. And also hurt because each group had been infiltrated by the Viet Cong. 20% of everybody that was fighting in this war for America's side or South Vietnam was compromised. That was the estimate. 20% of the workforce, the secretaries, the police, they're all paid off by the Viet Cong or, giving information on the side. And in the South, you had this guy, General Lone, who was trying to organize better, rename their intel operations. And so he talks about bringing out their own kind of Operation Phoenix called Phuong Hoang. And that's a mythological bird in Vietnam that only appeared in times of peace. It would fly with a flute in hand, versus the CIA's Phoenix, which was a bird from the rise from the ashes. So I just found that interesting that the Vietnamese bird they chose, their operation was named after peace, and Phoenix was named after one that's like destruction and rebirth. And then in 1967, the action programs for attack on VC infrastructure was signed. And this is the most significant Phoenix document. So this is when it really officially is signed into like whatever, that they're going to do this. They have these programs. They have these courses over 18 months. They had reporting requirements, tables of organization, major problems, foreign groups to solve these problems. Basically, it was like an all-encompassing it was all encompassing on it, like what to do with the Viet Cong. And it didn't even stop there. It also went going after rival political parties, mainly the Buddhists, open season of settling scores. So again, like it is just, the more I read this book, the more horrible I find out Vietnam was. It was just literally like, I know I always use this stupid example of the DMV, but that's what it was. It was like fighting a war with the DMV organizing. It was take a ticket, things that made no sense, unlimited resources because of our tax dollars and the drug trade for the CIA. It was a mess, but enabled Colby to manage Phoenix without having to consult agency heads. So this is a win for the CIA. They can do whatever they want now. They signed the Phoenix like agreement with Congress or whatever. And now they don't need to keep coming back and saying, hey, you think it's okay we do this? Obviously, they're not going to tell them about 90% of what they're doing, but now they can just go ahead and rock with it. And so Colby, he led Phoenix, and he was the man who jump-started, kept it running. And then the leading general or politician, that General Lone, he was he was kind of against Operation Phoenix because he was worried it would remove Vietnamese sovereignty, as he was correct, and didn't trust the CIA, who was actually backing him. So, he didn't think that one all the way through. And we'll find out what happens to General Lone pretty soon. They also convinced, though, to LBJ that Phoenix, that's the light at the end of the tunnel, baby. Once this is running on full cylinders, the communists, they're done for. They won't stand a chance. And this was this get tough policy, like behind Phoenix. And it was the 2 years previous was a stalemate of fighting. And just wait, we're going to get to what happens like in 2 minutes. But it was the final solution of distinguishing between a covert communist enemy and an ally. So we began hunting the Viet Cong in villages, which the Vietnamese, they were very reluctant to do. And one honest CIA guy said, it's very hard to carry out secret covert operations and repressive kinds of things in order to separate the guerrillas from the people and then make a speech to them about how their individual rights are important. So what he was saying is the CIA and these people, they would go into a village, they'd corner it off, they block it all in, they'd kill whoever they interrogate, whatever. And then they'd say, see, this is what you get. This is why we're doing this, for freedom, for sovereignty. But you just came into my village and dumped and just terrorized all my people in my village. So it just isn't going to work out for us or for them or for the CIA people. And Phoenix was done also without Vietnamese support because the Viet Cong had infiltrated each part of the Southern government police forces. So any plan shared with them was going to get leaked. So that's another why Phoenix was like big for the South, because Americans were like, well, they can't win the war on themselves. We have to win this war for them. And we need to keep Phoenix separated from the Vietnamese government because there's 20% of them are spies. And so once one move they started was started doing most wanted photos plastered on every street lamp, every tree. And this was big because it's a cash incentive. And that's what motivates many of these poor Vietnamese people. And they also would have a picture of the Phoenix on the posters as well. So I would love to find one of those posters. If anyone's like bored and looking at Google, look up a Operation Phoenix most wanted photo. But this one guy, Bowie, too, he killed a sergeant. He had files on CIA officers that were hunting him. They had where the CIA slept, their daily movements. And so they captured documents where his whereabouts were revealed. And as all Phoenix moved, they put all these wanted posters, and they loved the wanted posters as well because it caused psychological damage to these Viet Cong, because now they can't go into the places because they may be sold out. Someone's going to turn them in. So the wanted poster, and I was trying to relate that to today. And I guess we don't really have like a wanted poster system that's brought back, like in the sense that like political dissidents, but all they do is they use the press or they cancel you. They run a news story on you. So it's a similar, I was trying to make connections between Phoenix and bringing it back to America. And then there was these jails in Vietnam that were split between POW and civilians. And the ones that were ran by Phoenix were beyond horrible. I think we talked about that, how Phoenix was torturing these people, like using animals to put in orifices, hanging them from like a body part on a ceiling fan and spinning them for hours. I mean, medieval torture devices. They talked about how these Phoenix jails, men would be chained together, lined in the hallways with bones pushing the wrong ways. And again, how you get humans to this is like a science experiment, because the Japanese did some horrible things to American POWs, and I'm sure there was Americans that did horrible things as well. But this whole war was just so gruesome and violent. It was watching over what are humans going to respond to this? How are they going to come out? And we're going to get into some awesome quotes later that lead to why they brought it back with serial killers and how they were using it today. But so by 67, Vietnam is not getting any better. Elections, all a sham. And remember, this war is supposedly to stop communism and support fellow Christians. The Christians that were converted by the French Jesuits. You want to know what percentage was Christian in Vietnam? 8%. So we have 5% that's politically active, 8% that's Christian. No one wants this war. So why is the war happening? And I guess that's like the $1 million question. But as Dave said earlier, money, right? So LBJ gives $39 million to the CIA to create like this action team. And that's because the Vietnamese police didn't have the drive or manpower to search out Viet Cong. And more millions were being given. It's just getting stolen. For example, one province was given a few million. It's investigated 8 people that were getting paid were made up employees, non-existent, just to get more cash. And they came up with a fingerprint system to stop this madness. And it just continues. The corruption just so deep in this poor country. And regardless, the political war was not going well. Nation building is very difficult. If you ask anybody in our American government, they think it's so easy. You just go in and start a government. And we can see from Vietnam and on, we have failed every time when we try to do this nation building. I guess you could make a point for Korea, but that didn't happen until like 30 years after the Korean War. But and it's just guys, right? That's fake, like, oh, we're trying to build this nation in democracy. It's a scam. That's not why we're there. The people at the top know that's not our goal. It's to profit on this war, this death, and this destruction. The PRU advisor. So PRU, they're like this elite unit, relatively speaking. They're the ones I talked about last episode, the black pajamas. They would go in a white ceremony. They'd be propagandized on why capitalism is so great, why democracy is so great. And then the lights would go out and the lights would go on. And it was like a graduation ceremony, and they'd be all in black. And they were kind of like they were an actual trained unit. And they would go in and do these, like, they would go into villages like a shock in the middle of the night or whatever. And yeah. So they would do the PRU teams, they would do what the Viet Cong would do in regards to assassinations and butchery. They would do the disemboweling and leave out in the open to send a message to the Viet Cong, like, two can play at this game. Because, evil is always finished when you do the same evil back to somebody. That's how you end violence, right? Just insane. And the PRU, they were not a law enforcement or Asian organization. They were CIA assets that totally operated outside the law, no powers of, they would get like these things like take what action you think is best, and which meant killing, capturing the Viet Cong in their own villages. And this takes, especially at this time in Vietnam, police officers walking a beat, they couldn't do this. Like the police at this was way out of their league. They're fighting in the pros when they're also corrupt as well. So you needed a special unit to take care of this. But the issue with the PRU was the idea of just getting a single person in these raids was not appealing, because the headlines, they're not going to tout a single capture like, oh, leader, your name's not going to get put in a book and ranted and raved about for capturing one person, for having 20 people to capture one guy. So these were more precise actions. And the CIA, being the children that they are, these narcissistic psychopaths, they want to get their name in the big books. They want to be the guy that can write a book later on about how he saved the country. And so these operations, they're not exciting to them, right? They want to be bragging. That's again speaks volumes of the type of people that go into the CIA. So conventional warriors search for these big battles, while the PRU focused on the counterinsurgency. And this book also really taught me how ill-trained many, if not all, of our government employees are, which I know is no surprise. But like, you think like these CIA guys and these like top people in the military, you think they've honed their skills at this point, but still in the late 60s, it's a total mess. Like, they sent this Yale graduate. He was the commander of a SEAL team to lead a PRU group. He had zero combat experience. So he's an Ivy League graduate. He's a commander of a Navy SEAL team. He's expected to run these operations where the shock and awe, to go into a village to get one guy. They say, good luck. That's it. And like, his advisor would be even more corrupt. So he didn't want to get involved at all because it was so dangerous. So you could imagine a 24-year-old kid or whatever in 1968, 22-year-old kid to lead a group of people that speak no one of the same language. You have a translator who can barely speak 500 words in English. So their attacks, dude, had to be so even if the guy was a great commander and great strategist and could, get good information, good intel, how do you explain what to do to people that don't speak the same language? Your translator knows a kindergarten level of English. It's not going to work out well at all. And I'm sure, by the time we get into Afghanistan or when we went there, they probably learned from this mistake in Vietnam that you need to have translators, you need to speak the language. But we did not know that yet in Vietnam, I guess. It was just, again, just crazy. And so they didn't know what to do. They were told, this was like the instruction. They'd say, mess with supply lines, harass, ambushes, destroy the enemy however you can. So you could see again how a 21-year-old kid who's terrified, he's in a new land, these are the instructions he's given. He sees someone get blown up in front of him. First day he's there. Well, his personality, his mind is like fractured immediately. Do you think he's going to treat these people, even if they're innocent farmers, with kindness and respect and patience? Or do you think he's going to just lump them all together? He doesn't want to be there. They don't want him to be there, and he was going to focus on surviving. Kindness is not going to come into play. So again, this is why Phoenix is such an important program, because they watch how people respond to these dangerous situations. And the first month of PRU, horrendous. It was utterly horrendous. Boats would be getting stuck for hours in low tide. They didn't know any Vietnamese. They didn't have any with them. They couldn't speak. It was just, again, another cluster F. And the one story, they told how they did this early morning ambush. And the Yale graduate guy, he has a grenade, the pin pulled, and he wanted to check out this hut. It's a type of place the Viet Cong would hide. He goes in, ready to toss in the grenade, and he looks in, thank God, and it's filled with women and children. Now, how many times will he stop looking in and not check to see if it's filled with women and children? Or maybe his closest partner in the military got killed the day before, and he's doing one of these things. Do you think he's going to say, oh, I should check for women and children in there? No. And do you think he's going to get in trouble if he doesn't? Who's going to tell? The CIA is not. And the Phoenix PRU eventually found its stride when they sent in a big CIA guy. They got better weapons, better planning. Brian says CIA always operating with kindness and patience. Yeah, that's what I would say for sure. I've seen their new the recruitment ads for the CIA. That's what I think. And that's even funnier too. Have you guys ever seen the CIA commercial? They did one during Pride Month. And it was utterly ridiculous. But it's like, I saw a guy in, I think, Utah. He's running for political office. He was a former CIA guy. And this was his quote. Oh my gosh. I wish I bookmarked it. If anybody knows the politician's name, put it in the chat. But he's a Utah politician, and he retweeted something about, I forget who he retweeted, but he was talking about, he's like, my many years in the CIA taught me how extreme radicalism can really harm a country. And I see that happening here. And I retweeted it, and I quote tweeted it, and I wrote like, dude, you are the most disgusting human being in the, but then I removed it because I'm like, damn, I don't want this. I should have just screenshot and then posted it. But just like the nerve and the sociopathy to say something like that. Like, your company's history has been one filled with violence, death, destruction. Never, you may like you're trying to put out this movie image of the CIA. You stopped extremism and radicalism all over the world. No, you didn't. How do you can't honestly tell me you mean that. But yeah, just look, I think he's in Utah and he's running. But they started working with locals, giving them helicopter rides in exchange for information on the Viet Cong and their villages. Again, this poor people, like they've never seen a helicopter. They're like, hey, we'll take you up in a ride. Come talk to us. And they would do it, and they'd be so happy. Oh, geez. So they would get information like big Viet Cong meetings. They'd get a helicopter gun. And I want to stress this one Navy guy wrote to the Yale University president how they needed more people with moral training and education because of the cruelties that were happening in Vietnam. Do you think that happened? Do you think Yale, Skull and Bones home, cared about the morality that was going on in Vietnam and what the ethical dilemmas were? And this PRU program, it grew, and it was solely American controlled, but they did have foreign spies working for them. So one mercenary working for the CIA worked as the local director of a Catholic boarding school. Now, why would you have a CIA asset working at a boarding school? My imagination runs a little bit wild with that, but that's what the CIA, again, we've talked about this over and over and over again. The CIA, you have no idea how many people are working for the CIA. They don't have to disclose any of this information, But why do you hire a mercenary to work at a Catholic boarding school in Vietnam? I don't know. The young guys in the PRU were more violent and they would go out and quote unquote waste people. And a Navy SEAL who worked in Phoenix described the PRU guys as made up of guys by and large who were doing time for murder, rape, theft, and assault in Vietnam. The CIA would bail them out of jail under the condition they would work in these mercenary units. And I talked about this last episode. They would say you have 20 years on your sentence for this horrific crime. Come work for us. We'll train you into be a killer. We're going to release you. And you can take every person you kill will take a year off your sentence. Obviously, they agreed. They are people in jail that love violence. And so, but then they realized some of them were lying. And how do you know if you killed them? So the CIA said, well, to prove to us that you killed a Viet Cong, you need to bring their earlobe or their ear back. And so that's why I think some movies they're wearing like necklaces of ears. That was closely related to Phoenix and these PRU guys and that shock and awe, terror kind of thing. They would also, of course, they'd steal weapons, rob armories in South Vietnam, and then sell them back to the CIA. Again, just so we're sending tax dollars, we're buying weapons, military grade to protect our brave troops. The CIA would have their mercenaries go rob the armories from the military and sell them to the CIA because now you have unmarked guns, on and on. So like the CIA is essentially like a totally separate. It's like working its own government. It hates the military, doesn't trust the army, won't work with the army, and they're creating their whole new thing. They would also ambush lots of tax collectors. Was it because these people were Viet Cong? No, it's because the tax collectors had money and the mercenaries wanted a little extra cash. So it was just robbing American tax dollars, giving it back to the unregulated gang that is the CIA. And they would rob these tax collectors in the morning when they made their collections. And then they would say, oh, he was a Viet Cong. We got the fire burned in the firefight. And they keep the cash. Does that sound like a solid run operation to you? And from this SEAL's perspective, Phoenix was designed to disrupt the infrastructure of the Viet Cong village systems. So sometimes this meant coming into a village, killing the chief, pinning it on the Viet Cong. And the idea was to break down the entire Viet Cong system in that area, which didn't work because the Viet Cong didn't organize in hierarchies. Like a king, you topple a king, it becomes struggle city because now everyone's vying for power. But the Viet Cong, it didn't have like a king. It had many smaller guerrilla units. So there was not real one figurehead to say, we need to get him. He's the president of the Viet Cong. It didn't work like that. And he also said Phoenix was being utilized by the Viet Cong because they would release info and Phoenix would get this info through their spies or their network or buying for information. And they'd end up killing somebody the Viet Cong wanted dead. It was just beyond, I'm going to say that like 100 more times because it was just chaos. And you'd have guys in Phoenix, like I said, who spoke no Vietnamese, would have a knife to the person that they think they're supposed to whack, and they'd have zero clue if it's the right guy. Now, how many times do you think that they stopped and they said, I'm not sure this is my guy? I may be the first few, and then they just would kill him. Phoenix realized to get a village chief, you needed to get a dedicated agent scoping out the village for months, and then you'd get the chance, organize the team. Maybe it won't work. So all that work for Phoenix realized to get like a village chief, it's much easier just to send in these crazy mercenaries, people that are either insane like the serial killers or maybe sociopaths or super violent. And you just send them in, tell them, do what you got to do and get the village chief for us. And they would go in and slaughter a village and just do all this utter violence. And so Phoenix started off as a true counter-terror unit. It's to stop the terror of the Viet Cong, stop the guys calling the hits on school teachers and postmen. And instead, it morphed into the terror unit of the Americans. So the terror attacks that we said how he made this Viet Cong so evil, the Phoenix and the CIA did exactly the same stuff. Now, this is where it gets really exciting. So in September of 1967, it's called Tet. And I didn't know what Tet was. And this is really when everything changed in Vietnam. So this guy, Louis Lapham, he's appointed Saigon chief of station. You can think of him as like the classic spy from like a James Bond movies. his focus was stability to the South Vietnamese and programs like Phoenix, promising whatever support was needed to the president's view while steering him towards U.S. objectives through the use of political parties or assets managed by the CIA. So this president, the CIA is guiding him to make the decisions that they want him to make, which seems not too earth-shattering. That's obviously what they do. And they use spies or people they paid off in his government, his closest allies, to help guide him to the way that the CIA wanted. So this was making sure he's not going to say, you know what, this war is pointless. Let's stop fighting. No. They need this war to keep going for all the reasons we're going to eventually get into. They also recruited native Vietnamese to work for the CIA, unbeknownst to like the CIA, the Vietnamese government. So they'd be working in the Vietnamese government. The CIA would hire them, just like I was saying. And the CIA at this time was actually trying to reach settlements with the communists in both the North and the South by providing secure lines to communicate through. So I know I just said the CIA didn't want the war to end, but this in September of 67, supposedly, well, no, they were. The CIA, they were supposedly trying to calm the fighting down. They didn't want to fight anymore. These are untapped lines. This isn't the military. You're talking to the CIA, buddy. Come on. Man to man. This isn't CIA agent, whatever. This is your buddy. I'm trying to help you. And so this all changed, though, when this Eugene McCarthy, he was a senator. He entered the presidential race. Why this changed, the CIA guy who the book was interviewing, it wouldn't divulge, but he said that the lines of communication had become compromised. And so these lines, the chilling, come on, let's just chill and hang out. Let's stop fighting. They all collapsed in 1968. Why did they all collapse? Because the Tet Offensive. So January 31st, 1968, thousands, imagine a swarm of gosh darn bumblebees or hornets, thousands of the Viet Cong attacked simultaneously all these South Vietnamese cities. They destroyed, this Tet, it was called the Tet Offensive. It destroyed everything that the Americans kept, propagandizing everyone like, we got you, we'll protect you. We're winning, the light at the end of the tunnel. We're almost there. They're almost wiped out. We don't think they have much resistance left. Well, and that all was shot down in that light at the end of the tunnel just got dark very, very quick. Tet poured gasoline on the anti-war movement. It prompted the war managers to wonder, how could the Viet Cong mount such a massive campaign without ever being detected? Don't we have spies everywhere? And like, guys, when I say this, thousands died. Like they had rocket launchers. They just simultaneously, they attacked each city with their guerrilla units, and so many died. So like CIA, military, Vietnamese, so many died. And Tet proved to the world that the Viet Cong shadow government existed and was capable of mobilizing masses of people. So again, I said how this book wasn't like a conspiracy written. It's very factual. It's bookmarks or whatever, book notes. What's the word I'm thinking of? All the stuff. But so what my conspiracy take is you're telling me, so this reminds me exactly of 9/11, right? This Tet Offensive. These guys in the jungle that don't have advanced resources, that don't have unlimited funding, that don't have the most advanced weapons, were able to mount such an amazing offensive against everybody simultaneously, never being discovered, never being popped up. No one knew about it, totally by surprise. You expect me to believe that after we've just spent billions of dollars to supposedly end this Viet Cong infrastructure? And so that's why it reminds me of 9/11. It's like the exact thing. These guys in caves riding camels were able to outsmart NORAD and all this stuff and put off the biggest, attack on American soil ever or whatever since I don't know when, but a long time. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. Why this Tet Offensive would go off? Why? And it's just a coincidence that the CIA months before this were supposedly working on ways to kind of pull back and to let's stop fighting. No, what it sounds like to me is they were like, we need more money. We want more attention. We want more people to feel sorry for these Vietnamese. So what do? Let's allow, it was like Pearl Harbor. Again, it was like all these attacks that are allowed to happen to justify what they wanted to do the whole time, the problem, reaction, solution. And the Tet, so Tet is also a big holiday in Vietnam. And this was another thing. So supposedly this Tet holiday, there was this 7-day truce between the North and the South. This gets reduced to 3 days, but it put all the allies, or all the Vietnamese and the CIA and the military, they said, okay, it gets reduced to 3 days, a 3-day truce, but they're all relaxed. So again, were the Viet Cong so brilliant that they, with no single figurehead, they said, let's trick them with the 7, let's say it's a truce and we'll actually attack them? I don't think so. I think the CIA said, guys, let's, or, whatever they do, they're smart people. They just told them, like, you guys should attack these days. We're going to be, guard is down. They don't know why this is going on, but they do it. And yeah. So it just this whole Tet offensive, which changed the war in 1968, almost 1968. It just, it doesn't make sense. And this, they just simultaneously, these cities, villages, towns were rocked with mortars, rocked with grenades, followed by a huge ground attack. No one had any idea. No one thought that was going to happen ever. Do you think that the CIA is that confident in their abilities? We've only heard about how chaotic it is there. And so the CIA during this attack, they're freaking the F out. They're burning files. They are running like chickens with their heads cut off, thinking this is their last moment, because their embassies, their compounds are being surrounded. And many did perish, like I said. But the month of February was recovering from this massive blow. Tet major attacks were the PRU interrogation centers, the CIA embassy houses, and the VC also, again, like Afghanistan, had lists of all the people that collaborated with the Americans. They lined them up in the street and executed them. Mass graves with bodies just thrown in it. Now, this might get you to feel bad for the CIA, but and you shouldn't. I do feel bad for the Americans and the Vietnamese trying to do what they thought is right. But these lists were no different than the lists that were generated in Operation Phoenix for the Viet Cong. So these blacklists that they came after. And another positive of this horrible event, it pushed the Vietnamese to participate in Phoenix and to agree to it. So again, this is why I think the CIA probably planned it, because as we talked about earlier, that General Lone, he was like, oh, I don't know if I trust this. The CIA might backstab me or might, take our autonomy. But now this huge attack, the Vietnamese said, we need Phoenix. We need you guys. We're going to be toast without you. And so out of these mass graves rose Phoenix. And on March 5th, 1968, the Pentagon, the armed forces, and the Vietnam and the CIA all fully embraced the Phoenix program. And Tet had huge impacts beyond the death. LBJ, he stopped seeking re-election. It demoralized many Americans. But the CIA knew Phoenix would be an instrument to cripple, get vengeance, and expose the enemy. And prior to Tet, it was very hard to get significant losses to the Viet Cong leaders. You couldn't find them, etc. But because of this attack, Tet put all of them, the spies that were hiding in the South or hiding wherever, it put them in the limelight. And their capos, all the people with 10, 20 years of combat experience fighting guerrilla warfare started getting caught because now they showed their cards. So again, you could see the CIA is not above sacrificing however many people they need to complete their objective. So that's why, again, I think this Tet offensive, this huge attack, was a CIA false flag, like Pearl Harbor, like 9/11, was an event used to justify what they wanted in the beginning. And these agents they placed in deep cover situations were exposed goners for the Viet Cong. And this pushed Phoenix into the limelight. And though still a divide between the CIA and the military, it was bridged significantly after this Tet offensive. But it was a psychological victory for the Viet Cong. Cynicism developed among the staff. The usual phrases that we heard to describe like the Asian people in these Asian wars, like rhymes with kook, these type of words. They were prevalent. They were around prior to this event, but this solidified all of these Americans and soldiers who were fighting in this foreign country it changed from them like saying they thought they wanted to help these people to that they demean them so they could do these horrible, violent things, because the human brain has to think of you, unless you're a psycho, you can't kill somebody that you value or respect or whatever. It's very much more challenging. So now this Tet Offensive shipped something in their brain, and now they're beneath them. They are bugs that can be squashed. They can do whatever they want because they're so evil, or this Tet Offensive, they killed their friend. You get what I'm trying to go with. And Colby would solidify himself as the man most closely associated with Phoenix. And I talked about this before, but Colby was involved in the Franklin scandal. And so anytime that, like the book that I've read, John DeCamp, he was a senator, he references Colby all throughout the book. Colby was the one who investigated the plane crash that killed this lead prosecutor, and the Franklin scandal was going to blow the lid on the whole thing. So Colby brought back all of this learned information of what happens to people, and he brought it back to America. And so LBJ, he tries now to work out a settlement because he's not going to seek re-election after the Tet, and he wants to get Hubert Humphrey elected. So Nixon jumps on this issue and uses it to subvert the Democrats. Now, this was very interesting. What's up, Peanut? What's up, Wes? What's going on, dude? So after the Tet, like I said, LBJ stopped. Nixon, he's using this like Reagan did with, or George Bush did, the October surprise, whatever, with not releasing the POWs until after the election. So Nixon, I learned, this is like, so I'm just going to explain it, but I'm very excited because I learned something super huge here. So Nixon, he's buddies with Allen Dulles, and he's been friends with Allen Dulles for a long time. Okay. Before he even won his election in California, Dulles and his buddies or whatever helped Nixon get elected by making phone calls. There was an incumbent, a normal Democrat guy in California. California was very red at the time in the 50s or whatever, 50s, early 60s. And so they made all these phone calls for Nixon saying, oh, did you hear so-and-so, whoever is like he was running against is a communist? And they got in trouble for it. And they say, oh no, they're just prank calls. We don't know who's making them. So Nixon has deep ties to the CIA. So Nixon, he's sponsored by the KMT, the Chinese Nationalist Party. He's getting funding. He's helping them get support. And this is run by Chiang Kai-shek. So he works out this deal, Nixon does, to postpone negotiations in Vietnam until after the election, securing himself the presidency and helping out the military-industrial complex to prolong the war. Win, 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 except for the people, as always. And so the KMT, this is what I found interesting. They were the party that we learned Operation Gladio from, that they were the Chiang Kai-shek. He was growing opium, selling it, getting people addicted to fund his war against this communist in China, because they were nationalists, the KMT. They were capitalist nationalists, got funding from the CIA very often. So the KMT, the Chiang Kai-shek, they fight a civil war in mainland China. And this is during World War II, after World War II, immediately after. And obviously the nationalists lost to the CCP. So Chiang Kai-shek, he retreats with his military to Taiwan, where they took over, they instituted martial law. And then eventually, like in the 90s, they have a constitution. But that's where Taiwan gets its government from, is from Chiang Kai-shek and the civil war between the CCP and these Chinese nationalists who are closely associated with the CIA. And then they moved to Taiwan. And that's why there's this huge beef there, is because I didn't know that. So maybe you guys knew that. I found that fascinating. So that this civil war in China, that's why Taiwan's different than mainland China, because that's where the nationalists of the Chinese went to make their last stand, or whatever you want to call it. And that's why this 100-year beef between Taiwan and China. It stems from this civil war in the 1940s. And important I said that about the Dulles, but and Nixon's connections. But yeah, back to Phoenix though. Okay. But I just found that interesting that Nixon was like a darling of the KMT and Dulles and the CIA. And so again, by him winning, it's assuring that the Vietnam War can continue. And the South could not catch a break. possibly on purpose. I don't know. But General Lone, who was that guy that he didn't really trust Phoenix, he's essentially numero uno. He thought the CIA was going to come after him. They were going to backstab him. Well, what do you know? He's getting on a helicopter, gets shot and killed. No way. Chaos, the CIA does not, if they fund you, they don't like when you talk out about them. And so people now are vying for the top of the power pyramid. And so so now there's all these people trying to get General Lone's spot. And there's a few in the South that don't want the war anymore. Well, they're going on they're all meeting, talking about what they should do next. And what do you know? Totally accidentally, a gunship machine gun rocket launcher malfunctions and hits this wall that collapses on 7 of these high-ranking officials, all who are hoping to just obtain peace and get the Americans out of Vietnam. And just hilarious. Just not hilarious, but just like, again, and the CIA was asked, they said, "Oh, no, it just malfunctioned. We don't know what happened." Oh, really? Wow. What are the odds that gun malfunction shot a wall that killed 7 of the peace candidates who wanted to end the war? And the story, the malfunctioning was also, I forgot to add this. These people, they weren't the reason why they were where they were was the Americans invited them, these 7 high ranking officials, to the battlefront to show them these like new, whatever, guns or tactics. And that was why all 7 of them were there and together. Then they got shot and killed by a malfunctioning artillery. So these people all those 7 high officials, they followed this guy, the peace candidate, Kai. And so all of Kai's people are dead, injured, in the grave. And then President Thieu, who was placed there by the CIA, he begins to shape the government of Vietnam, appointing the people that are going to do his bidding into power. And President Thieu, he's corrupted beyond belief. He's getting millions of dollars. And so the only thing he has to do is prolong the war. He can't give up. He has to keep saying, "Oh, we need to fight this war." And they also lifted President Thieu wrote this Law 280. And so it basically got the monkey off the US, the monkey off the back of the US. And so now they were looking the other way so it helped the Americans. And then the way the CIA helped President Thieu was that they began looking the other way as he persecuted his political opponents, normally the peace candidates, people maybe that weren't too into the Vietnam War. And the CIA said, "Well, okay, yeah, just go kill him. We're not going to tell anybody. Oh, he's missing. Oh, that's very sad." Just so much corruption. And so this 280 law, brilliant. It's what they did in Ukraine. The 280 law changed the law so you could, anybody that was a guest communist or whatever, possibly had affiliations with the VC, they would get they wouldn't get a trial. They would be tortured, blah, blah, blah. Well, this Law 280 stretched what the defined as a Viet Cong cadre. And that was the phrase they used. So now anybody that's not fully gung-ho on the Vietnam War and Operation Phoenix, they can be labeled as a communist sympathizer and you'll be thrown in jail. And the only way you get out is through bribery or corruption. So this 280 forced Vietnamese commanders and province chiefs to organize their own Phoenix. So you had Phoenix on the American side, and you had that Phuong Hoang Committee, which is the Phoenix of Vietnam, and it had to be in every province. You had to be running these operations. And the Americans supported Phoenix to run on this 280 on full cylinders. So the hardcore Viet Cong, they're transported. If you guys don't remember, I talked about that island prison that the French built long time, back in episode 1 and 2. It was called Con Son Island. So they were filling this prison up. So how do you get convicted, you might ask? Well, I just talked about this Law 280 that changed. And so they were these trials. That's how you get sent to Con Son Island prison. But so you have a trial, but they're closed to the public. Of course, you can't let secrets get out. No attorney. If you're innocent, why do you need an attorney, right? You couldn't review the charges against you. You were screwed. Unless you had lots of money, you're getting put in Con Son prison. And by 1968, Phoenix and Phuong Hoang existed in 42 provinces and 111 districts. Phoenix had 155 advisors. And still, though, the largest like issue with Phoenix is this competition between the military and the CIA. And the CIA, they also wrote 2 handbooks. 31 pages was the one, a manual describing detailed pictures of how to attack the Viet Cong, how there's 70,000 of them, becoming specific and scientific, how to deal with scenarios and stuff like that. And much emphasis is placed on the neutralization rates. Neutralization obviously means getting whacked. Who's putting out which province is getting the most Viet Cong with the biggest bang, with the biggest or the smallest buck, or whatever you want to call it. And so they started this record keeping. And I forget the rule. Like there's like a saying in the business world or whatever. Like if you set a system up, like you need to hit this many numbers or like, like numbers or phone calls or sales or whatever, people stop trying to get the ultimate goal, which is make the sale. And instead they just try to hit these parameters or like objectives that they have to meet every day. So just like in the regular world, the CIA puts out all these objectives you need to hit, all these numbers that you need to get to show that Phoenix is running well. So they're keeping scores of like how many Viet Cong have you neutralized, how many blah, blah, blah. So all this record keeping, obviously people will cheat because the better you do, the more money you get from the CIA in your province. So it was like, oh, look, we caught 300 Viet Cong. No one for sure are these actual Viet Cong people. And they're not knowing, is this the Phoenix program bringing them in? So a lot of things now, and then anything done, like any violence, it was, oh no, this was done in the name of Operation Phoenix. It's above your pay grade. Don't worry about it. Yeah, we slaughtered that village. Operation Phoenix. You understand. The burning of this village? Sorry, man. Operation Phoenix. You get it. And that's all. It just added all this chaos. And it reminds me of like how police write tickets, like their monthly quota that they say they don't have, but we know they have. That was what the CIA was doing to Phoenix. It was a literal quota you had to hit of how many Viet Cong you're supposed to capture. So an honest CIA guy was quoted saying that Phoenix was just Gestapo tactics were very similar. The Nazis, who Dulles and the CIA had a fascination with, as we all know, they worked with them. They brought them over. They didn't hate that they worked with them after the war. They started NASA, all these things. They just used the same tactics the Gestapo had. So they also had quotas. They'd say, like a Nazi would call in and say, like, Himmler, I got this many this week or whatever, and trying to get brownie points, trying to get promotions. This is the same thing, same scenario for CIA in Phoenix. Did they get the idea from the Nazis? I don't know, but it was the same setup. When you say you have to get 10 Viet Cong a month, what do you think is going to happen? What if they have 6? They got 6 and they've got a week left. Do you think they're going to be just as stringent on making sure the poor Vietnamese farmer isn't Viet Cong? No, they're not. So some provinces were red hot after Tet. One was managed by this guy, Warren Milberg, who worked for the CIA. He actually went on to work for Titan Corporation after Vietnam, designing Star Wars lasers. And this story of like the CIA going to the private industry after is so common, so frequent. Just like the guy we were just talking about, the CIA politician, after they leave the CIA, they've got crazy security clearance. They get to work for all these military industrial complex companies or the government. They've got the connections. They've got abilities to get huge contracts. It's a stepping stone for just death, really. I mean, that's really what it is. And Milberg, he believed it was a young soldier's rite of passage to fight into Vietnam, to see this violence and death. Milberg also liked to work with not going. That wasn't what I meant to say. He worked with long-range mercenaries. So they would stand thousands of yards away to shoot Viet Cong people with like snipers and stuff. And he would be laughing. He enjoyed that. He thought that was very enjoyable to watch them get shot from thousands of yards away. And so he said, the Vietnamese were gangsters and thugs, the mercenaries who we trained and who were on our pay. But my perception of the counter-terror teams was to strike terror into the enemy. Basically, with that quote, I was like, why did I highlight that quote? But it was because they're making justifications that the violence that the CIA is doing is doing because these people are evil. They need to meet the level of evil. And that's also important because the CIA never stopped that mindset. That's probably what they teach these people, that the Americans, us, are the enemy, the extremist, or whoever political organization or group or type of people they want to go after, they're going to come back. That's the mindset they have, that they're fighting the ultimate evil. And that's why, like, all these false flags, especially the chaos going on now in America, that's usually planted by this and fostered by the CIA, or school shootings and all this stuff that is promoted by the FBI and the CIA, because they're propagandize these people into think that us Americans, their fellow countrymen, are the true evil. And they believe it. They believe it. And there's a beautiful quote by Aldous Huxley, and I've posted it before, but basically the quote is, if you can get people to believe a certain type of person is beneath them or less than, maybe because of what they look like or what they believe or what actions they take, and then you tell them it's good, it's moral to beat up on this person because they're evil, that's the best type of scenario you can come up with. And that's what we have today, whether it's anti-vaxxers or whatever. You have the left, who has the papers, who has the loudest voice. You tell them you're virtuous for attacking people that don't believe the news. You're virtuous for attacking somebody that doesn't want to get poked. You're moral. They're evil, and that's what we have today. And that's again what they did in Vietnam. So this was that like a goal of Operation Phoenix? I don't know, but it was definitely, I'm sure, something they learned, that you can get people to do many things that they wouldn't normally do if you brainwash them into thinking the opposite of the political spectrum or whatever is evil. They'll commit atrocities because they think they're being virtuous. And so he was parachuted. Oh, so Milberg, he's like a very interesting character, this guy. He's been to Vietnam, but he gets on this team. He's on Operation Phoenix, and they make him parachute into North Vietnam. This is his first jump ever. He's never jumped out of a plane with a parachute. He described the mission as the most reckless thing he had ever seen or done. And he wondered if it was nothing more than a test to see how far they could push people to do fantastical stunts. And he would return for other tours. But I found that interesting. He said, that's what he said. He wondered if this was nothing more than a test to see how far they could push people to do insane things. And I wonder, and like, I don't have a precise example of that, but I found that like just so fascinating that he even wondered, the CIA guy wondered, like, this is totally unorganized. I've never even jumped out of a plane. You're having me jump in enemy territory to do what? For this little thing? This doesn't seem like this is a good idea, but people did it. And I just think about that. Like, I don't know. It seems like that's what we have today. We're not jumping out of planes, but the metaphor is there that they're doing things. And it's almost like, how crazy can you get people to be? And I think the media and the CIA and these culture creators, that's what they want to make us like just do whatever they say. And I think that's pretty easily agreed. And so last episode, I talked about this guy, Manzione. And so Manzione, his story, he was a SEAL. He was a vicious killer. Like the story he told was before he went to Vietnam, they dropped him in a jungle for 10 days with just a knife and a compass. And they said, come find us. You have 10 days. And he was just like, you can think he's just like a Rambo type character, like just vicious. He would slaughter anything, blah, blah. He was a madman, dude. He was like probably kind of psychotic, probably not all there, probably has some split personality disorder or whatever. And so he was told he could always ignore all the rules of engagement. That was because he was so good at killing and what he did. Rules of engagement did not matter. And so after the war, he talks to this author of the Phoenix program. And these are a few of his quotes that I just want to read to you because they're just so powerful. So he resented that he lost many men in off the books missions. That was his biggest gripe, that he lost his fellow soldiers in off the books missions. So they never get their name on the Washington Monument, and they were just greased and forgotten. And he hated that. And he resented that he was this was very important. Wes will like this story about this Manzione and everybody, but it really relates to the serial killers. So he talked about how they created a killer out of him. And he talked about how once you make a commitment, it was impossible to go back. And he talked about like something about the human psyche that makes a person reluctant to admit a mistake. And this was what my training was all about. You've already killed the kook. I'm using this word instead of the actual word. It rhymes with kook, speaking of a Vietnamese person. And so then he said, so what if it isn't a dummy in the bed this time? So what if it's a living human being? That's what you're supposed to do. After the first, it only gets easier. So he was trained, all these guys, they're trained to kill with a dummy. And then they say, okay, in the same, they probably make a little fake cut and show you how you go in and how you kill the person in there, the asset or whatever. And just 1 second, Liv is knocking on the door. She thought I called her a kook. I told her I did not call her a kook. I was actually using the word that they used in the book, but she was very upset. She wanted to know why I was saying that word. She's just joking. But anyway, okay. Oh yeah. So he was talking about, he was trained, you kill a dummy in the bed. And so he in his brain, he had to when he did the first kill, he was like, okay, so why is it different? I've done this in practice 100 times. But he resented that he was trained to do this, that he was broken down to just be this violent machine. Oh, and this was a powerful quote. Oh, so he said, so what if you're supposed to do after the first, it only gets easier. Training is brainwashing. They destroy your identity and supply you with a new one, a uniform identity. Dave says, be careful. She knows where you sleep. Very true, dude. Very true. But so they supply you with a new one, a uniform identity. That's the reason for the uniform. For everyone having the same haircut, going to dinner, eating the same thing. They destroyed the street kid. They made him a sailor. They destroyed the sailor. They made him a SEAL. I was a guinea pig. There is no doubt in my mind today that they were using me to see how I'd react. I'm a pawn. We're all part of a robot machine. And I just was like, damn, dude, this was that guy. Like when I first started the book, I thought he was just a nut job, that he was out in the jungle, killing birds and whatever for, crawling through the muck to make these insane kills of Viet Congs. And after the war, he looked back on this and realized they broke him down. And I wish I could talk to this guy, because the way his quotes are, he's not a conspiracy guy. He's not going to say they brainwashed me. But that's essentially what he's saying. He's saying that they taught him that it's okay, that this is good. This is a good thing you're doing. You're killing these people for good, for help. And he realized afterwards, none of this was true. And so how hard would it be to tell a kid to do this to a kid who's going to take a weapon to a school or to a serial killer or what have you? They brought this brainwashing. They practiced with Charles Manson after the Vietnam War and everything like that, or during the same time. But they're finding out, they're experimenting all these different ways. How do we brainwash somebody to do exactly what they want? We'll try drugs, we'll try trauma, we'll try all this. And what's the most efficient? What's the best way to create this Manchurian candidate sort of thing? And another part of all this brainwashing and MK Ultra and stuff that they would do in Vietnam was because, so in World War II, the CIA, or I guess the OSS and the US military, was so amazed with the Japanese, because these guys would sacrifice themselves like a kamikaze. As long as it killed 2 people or killed more than them, it was a victory. They would I told the stories how they were digging their gold caves and blow themselves up inside happily. They'd be yelling "Banzai" or whatever they would yell while they were drinking, knowing they're about to die. And the US said, how do we get soldiers like that, dude? That's the soldier we want. And so all of this stuff in Vietnam is them testing this out of what's the best way to control people and to do this. I want to read Wes's comment. She didn't remember me. Wes is talking about his sister as MPD. She forgot her entire identity mid-work shift, had to go to the psych ward. Oh, are you saying Manzione wrote a book? I'll have to check. Oh, Clay Martin. I'm sorry, I'm reading all these chats and I'm trying to understand. He wrote Prairie and Fire in the Concrete Jungle. Oh, that's great. I don't. Are you talking about Manzione or no? This guy. But anyway, so and then he has a few more quotes that I just wanted to do. You can't function if you feel terrible, so you just stop feeling terrible. That was another thing. He talked about how he like the first kill, people would often like they'd shut down. And then so these people would often get killed because now they're feeling so bad for what they just did. They slaughtered. What if this person was innocent? Maybe they did kill an innocent person. But if you let yourself down like that, let your guard down, you would be killed. So you stopped doing that. You just turned off. And again, this was a success for the CIA because he was able to, they were able to just train these people to see this horrible violence, never seeing it before. They turned into these super soldiers that would kill innocent, do whatever they wanted because they're shut off that part of their brain. They split their personality through trauma. Last quote of Manzione, but he talks about laser guided smart bombs and how the US, we had all these fancy military with these laser guided smart bombs. And what the Viet Cong would do is they would light a bunch of tires and trash and start a bonfire. And with all the smoke, the laser would hit the smoke, and these bombs would just they couldn't see, they would set off, or they would artificially tell them to go off or whatever, and they would just be shooting the bombs all over the place, wasting them, probably killing innocents all over. And it was just like Manzione found it funny that a guy in the jungle with a match could screw up the $1 million bombs, causing countless unnecessary damage. And Manzione eventually renounces American imperialism. He speaks out against the CIA. Milberg, the guy that jumped off, who was working for the laser company, he never did. He said he loved being a member of this closed society. Relating to the enemy in human terms was a cause for expulsion. Again, important, because what do you think that our CIA and FBI views right-leaning political dissidents as human? No, they view you or us as evil, as something that needs to be removed. And this is our last chapter here, and it's gone. So hopefully you're understanding more and more about Phoenix. So Milberg, this guy, he ends up picking, like, this guy who's crazy. These people are crazy. First of all, they have to be. There's no other way. So he does another tour after jumping out of a plane, and he picks this town that's the bordering of North and South Vietnam, the most dangerous because of the proximity. So he has unlimited resources to pay for a staff that produced intelligence reports, operated a 40-man PRU team as his own personal army. He had a Marine that he said was a legitimate psychopath who he never participated in with what this psychopathic Marine would do as like bodyguard, but he was aware of everything he did. And he said normal aberrations which result in any form of warfare. So Milberg justifies this extreme violence. I'm sure this guy did, because this is normal in time of warfare. Well, we've been at war ever since, especially in the CIA and the FBI's mind. So I would assume that that's the way they feel about us is, well, this happens in any warfare. So he gets settled. The huge Operation Phoenix takes place in his province. Days of cross-referencing blacklist, escape routes, blocking them, sealing off the entire town. And so they before they go in to raid this little town or village, they have Psy-War planes drop off leaflets on the town, urging the populace to identify the Viet Cong, to surrender them, and we'll even give you a reward. We'll give you money for doing this. No one in the village took the deal. So in the early hours, a 25-man PRU team, accompanied by interrogators and CIA advisors, start searching the little huts for booby traps, weapons, documents, food, comparing the blacklist with every woman, man, child. Suspects were sent to screening zones. Bystanders were fed and entertained. And I use that word loosely. What the heck were they doing to enter that? I keep seeing this in this book. Like, that was an actual job for somebody, was to like entertain the village while they were tearing it apart and going through whatever small positions they had. Like, what are they juggling? What are they doing? Are they doing a stand-up routine? And then they push the hardcore Viet Cong in this village into this northeast corner. killed, captured. So this huge operation, this huge thing, 25-man PRU team, helicopters blocking off the whole village. They caught 2 Viet Cong, 8 were killed. They caught 2 VCI, 8 VCI were killed. They left. Do you think that town was saved? Did that town turn full South Vietnam? Within a month, the Viet Cong resumed control of this town. An army general, he objected to Phoenix. He said, I don't believe people in the uniform should be put in a position to break the Geneva Convention's laws of warfare. And the military also didn't like putting resources for these secret spy type attacks as opposed to a grand military battle. So I just think that this Operation Phoenix, again, it's so much bigger than the war. The war is not winnable. Like they can't, they're not, if you want it, like this type of war of grabbing land, pushing the enemy back, it doesn't work because these people are just hiding it. They're not like a military. They're just a guerrilla units hiding all around. So I think that was fine with the CIA because what they were gaining was much more valuable than actually, they didn't care. As long as they're not dying, they don't care. It's they've got unlimited resources. Wes says, technically, we have all been under mind control at one point. Dude, I totally agree. We all are right now, right? Like all of our beliefs, it's hard to tell what's ours and what's organic and how you feel and what's not been from propaganda. Either side, not just like communist propaganda or right-wing propaganda. And the CIA was everywhere in Vietnam. They played for political parties to overthrow the prince in Cambodia. They had an agent who became a double agent, this Vietnamese guy, and this one captain, he's sitting next to this double agent without warning. He shoots him in the head. He was tried for murder, the captain, and this brought to the light the Phoenix operation, the terminating with extreme prejudice. So I talked about that, I think, first episode, that the CIA, the precursor to Phoenix, they had like what you do with agents. Like one was like they're done, they get signed, they swear to secrecy, blah, blah, blah. Another one was like they get beat up and you tell them you better never see them again. And the third was terminating an asset with extreme prejudice. And so obviously they don't define what extreme prejudice means, but it's what this captain did. So regardless, the idea was regardless where the VCI are, the Viet Cong, if Phoenix can find their pattern, we can put the fear of God in them or influence their movements so they can never assemble. And the Phoenix and the military, they start working together by using these huge B-52 bombers, bombing any gathering of the Viet Cong with info from Phoenix. And they started having success with that model. But the inclusion of the Vietnamese in Phoenix in 1968 was not welcomed by the CIA security officers. And the flip side, people were saying, like, you can't run an operation that's so secretive because it won't run. And the CIA is very close on holding their information. Again, it's like this narcissistic personality. Phoenix isn't about winning the war. Maybe probably 90% of the CIA people don't know that, but they think like, oh, we can't let this information out. It'll ruin our plans or whatever. And but it was much beyond that. And the flip side, they were so secretive because the Viet Cong had already infiltrated the presidential palace, all places in Saigon, which is why Phoenix began unilaterally again, and it's why it failed. And so one example was this Colonel Phuoc. He was placed on house arrest, being implicated in a murder of Diem, who was the first CIA king or president or whatever. And he was tainted by the CIA, or he was tainted because he did this murder or he was associated with it. The CIA saved his career. They pull him out of that muck. They valued his contacts and his Catholic intelligence network in Cambodia. And he had lots of power positions. He had inside info with the CIA. And this guy, again, he eventually disappears, perishes in a mysterious plane accident. So Vietnam, on both sides of the coin, the Viet Cong and the CIA, they're mafias running a government. Grenades would be thrown in shops by the Viet Cong. The press would write it as terrorism, but really it was because someone wasn't paying their taxes to the Viet Cong. Bribes, payoffs, all this stuff is a way of life because of the colonialism from the French, these people just trying to survive. And this was a crazy story. One time in American Oil Company trucks, they're driving on down a Viet Cong road. It's blocked by one of their trucks and guns. The Viet Cong let the American oil company truck pass through. 5 minutes later, a South Vietnamese bus comes through. They take everybody off the bus, take all their money. They kill the two uniforms in uniform. So what this made me think was, why would the Viet Cong, if they're truly after the Americans, why are you letting an American capitalist organization, an oil truck, go through the road? And I don't know if I have like an answer for that. Why would you let unless they're being funded as well by the CIA? That's like my only thinking, is that we don't know, like that Tet Offensive that we talked about, the CIA clearly helped that along. So is it too much of a stretch to say that maybe they're funding to keep this war going? That's how the Viet Cong are getting money and staying connected and not winning, because they're paying them off. I don't know. But like I said, they just want to be left alone. And they had the GVN that's the South, to protect them in the day, and then they were left the Viet Cong at night. And it's like being caught between a rock and a hard place. Yeah. Anyway. So people would try to explain, if you let us know when the Viet Cong come, we'll blow them sky high. We'll keep you safe. And it didn't help that so they would strike the VC would leave, and there would be all this damage of innocent people. So you can see why these towns aren't like going out and saying, oh, the VC are coming, because every time they do that, their village gets torn to smithereens or blown to smithereens. And so they had this job. The least favorite job was damage assessment in Vietnam and in Phoenix. And so this was their justification. They tell the Vietnamese, this is a free fire zone. Like, there's active war here. So go to the relocation camp and live there. And otherwise you may get hurt. And they'd say, well, no, we don't want to leave. Our ancestors are buried here. Our animals are here. Like, our oxen are here. And they would stay. They'd say, no, we'll stay. And they were just terrorized by both sides. Villages with no names were completely wiped out. And there was this one guy, Wilson, who got put on this damage assessment duty for quote unquote fraternizing with enlisted men. And I don't know what that means, but he said after strikes, they would blow it up a village. They dropped 2 napalm bombs, which would fry everything. And this guy would have to go count all the bodies. And then he said that people higher up, though, were inflating the numbers. They were changing the numbers of women who were women and children that were killed to Viet Cong dead. And he told stories of how he just wanted to leave and desert and get out of praying he'd not be in Vietnam when he woke up. And it was around this time, this is our last topic, and then it's done for tonight. There was this magazine being written in Vietnam, which was awesome. And it was The Truth About Phoenix. That's the name of the magazine. So, we have some in America. They're at the Harvard University in the library. So this President Thieu, he created a Minister of Information in Vietnam. Always a good sign. So this underground magazine that was being printed, President Thieu had his Minister of Information make sure they couldn't let those get out, because you need to tell the poor South Vietnamese that, no, we're winning. The Viet Cong are on the ropes, blah, blah, blah. And so this author, he wrote under an alias, this magazine, but the CIA said they knew he was writing it. They said he was a commie sympathizer. But the author said, Phoenix is a series of continuous operations which, because of the bombing, destroy the countryside and put innocent people to death. In the sky, there are armed helicopters, but on the ground, there are black uniforms doing what they want where the helicopters do not reach. Americans in black uniforms are the most terrible. I told you about that, like the pajamas. That was like the Phoenix people and these high assassins. They would wear all black, like a ninja. I don't know. I feel like there's probably something with that. You're changing your personality when you put on this black uniform. All these, he would also write about the ears phenomenon in the magazine, talking about how even more greatly after Tet, people had these necklaces of ears as pride. So if it's someone who's struggling to believe that brainwashing and MK Ultra existed, how do you describe that? How do you get somebody who is probably a farmer back home, or his dad sold insurance? You put him here, and after a few months, he's wearing people he's killed ears around his neck. What is that if it is not brain? You're literally fracturing somebody's. They would never go into America. Would they wear that necklace in America? No. So you can they are learning you can control people's psyches by violence and trauma. And all these horrible actions taken by Phoenix and the military only led to poor farmers not trusting the Americans at all and siding with the Viet Cong. We would drop that Agent Orange dustings and napalming of unnamed towns. It made them feel like they were being attacked not by the Viet Cong, but by us, by the Americans. And the CIA, they declares, no, we're bombing and destroying the rice farms of the Viet Congs. That's not true. They were destroying these people who, again, we just said 5% of the population, 2.5 on both sides, wanted to be in this war. The 95% just wanted to have enough food for the next day, and we're poisoning them, we're bombing them, we're burning them to stop this Viet Cong. And this would lead to the wealthy people being forced to buy the rice from the Viet Cong, which then got them involved with Phoenix Blacklist because now they're giving the Viet Cong money to pay for food for their family or their village. Then they would get caught up in Phoenix. They'd have to pay off the Phoenix operatives to get out of being interrogated. It was just so messed up. False accusations, no recourse. Phoenix was feared in Vietnam. These people were so scared of being picked up and disappearing into one of these interrogation centers that the CIA made where they tortured them. They did these horrible things. And there was a quote, if they say they're innocent, beat them until they say they're guilty. That was the motto. That was the motto of these CIA guys. What's up, Gravy? What's going on? And Wes, it does say like he was probably talking about when I said when they put on that black, it's like change of their mind. But I think there's probably like a lot of truth to that. Just like a football player or whatever puts on I don't know, that's a poor example, but you put on this outfit to commit these atrocities and you take it off and now you're not that same person. That's what I think, at least. But the mind manipulation that went on in this war, it had everlasting effects because they just took it and brought it back home. And the CIA, they had unlimited resources. I've said so many times, they'd buy info so the people would sell the info to the CIA. They'd also give money. They'd sell it to the Viet Cong. And this information was tearing Vietnamese society apart. One story was a special branch agent taking payoffs from a local Viet Cong tax collector. And from this magazine, it said the CIA works to keep some communist areas. This was insane. Okay. All right. This is a perfect part to end on. So in this magazine, the problem with Operation Phoenix, it was said that the CIA works with some communist areas to keep them intact. Why? So they can get continued information. So this is literally in direct opposition of what the stated objective is of the Phoenix mission. So the CIA is allowing these communist areas to stay, not be attacked, not be infiltrated, because they're giving information to the CIA for the Viet Cong. Does that make any sense? Does that make any sense at all? This, again, is why I think that Tet Offensive was planned by the CIA. They're allowing villages that are controlled by the Viet Cong to exist for the sheer fact that they're getting information on the Viet Cong. Well, you have the Viet Cong right there. What information do you want? And that, like, how much death was organized out of these villages they kept? How many did they allow to exist? God knows, dude. God knows. And this goes on to our point in the conspiracy world that the CIA will literally play both sides to control and continue to get information. Essentially what 2016, 2020 elections and protests are all about. Just like the agent provocateur and all this stuff, the CIA continually proves to us that they will play both sides of the coin for their goal. And they will smash these two sides together, make money, get rich, cause death, destruction, chaos, and capitalize on that in whichever way they see fit. So that's it for tonight, guys. I hope it was an okay show. I worry. I like this book a lot, but it's not like it's more historical and it's not as, I don't know if that's entertaining or not. I found it, I like reading it a lot, but yeah. So basically what we learned again today is that Phoenix finally starts in 1968. That Tet Offensive changed the Vietnam War. LBJ quit his presidency, all this stuff. And Tet, I think, it sounds like a Pearl Harbor, a 9/11, a false flag event to prolong the Vietnam War. just like they prolonged World War One, just like they prolonged World War II. They're prolonging Vietnam because war makes money. And these people at the top, these bankers, these usurers, these politicians, these military industrial complex people make millions on the death and destruction of regular folks like you and me. So that's it, guys. Gravy anytime, dude. I don't know any MMA. I actually can't watch it. It gets me, I feel so bad. They're getting beat up. I'm a wuss. Dave, thanks for coming. Wes, we'll reschedule after the wedding. So when I see you guys next, maybe I'll bring Liv Allen on to introduce her as the co-host in the background officially. But thanks for listening, guys. Have fun. Have a great weekend. God bless. And I'll see you next week. So thanks, everybody. I'm Jack Allen. Conspiracy or Just a Coincidence. Peace.